Before we go any further, in light of the Newtown shooting, I found these comments by the House Minority Leader Steny Hoyer so over the top, and very little criticism, very little notice in the media, but it's important that I think we highlight it, especially in light of that shooting. Watch this.
It is somewhat like taking your child hostage and saying to somebody else, I'm going to shoot my child if you don't do what I want done. You don't want to shoot your child. There is no Republican leader that wants to default on our debt.
Juan, I know you would never support something like that, but you would think, is there any little sensitivity here?
Well, you should have it. I mean,
that example at this time?
Yeah, I agree. Look, I mean, we don't need that kind of hyperbole right now, and I think the whole nation's kind of raw. It's the Christmas season over the death of so many children so tragically, so we don't need it. But the fact is that Republicans, and I think this is Steny Hoyer's point, Republicans have been playing hardball, and I think that when you say the president hasn't made concessions, I think you're off base. I think the president has said, listen, it's everybody, 98% of Americans that he wants to give an extension of the Bush tax cuts to. 98%. And then he negotiated, said, I'll go up to 99%. It's 400,000. 400,000, so he lifted that rate. Then he said, I'll chain all entitlement spending to the CPI. And that was going to, again, hurt cuts in entitlement spending.
Wait, here you have a major concession by John Boehner, which ultimately the Republicans weren't going to go along with. But he said he would increase rates. He went to $1 million. Yeah. The president mocks him publicly and says, oh, I won. And then he says, oh, so he wants to give tax cuts to those that make $900,000 a year. Does that sound productive to you, Juan? Because that sounded like he was rubbing it right in his face the minute that he was willing to negotiate.
Sean, you can't blame President Obama and the Democrats for the fact that Republicans, his own Republicans, abandoned John Boehner, took away his power to negotiate with President Obama, and pretty much went home, and they're still at home. I mean, you know, it's unbelievable. 3/4 of the American people think compromise.
Hey, Juan,
and compromise includes spending cuts and some tax hikes.
Can I get a word in here, guys?
Brent Bozell, the Republicans passed a bill. The Republicans passed it. The Senate Democrats haven't passed the bill in 1,300 days. You've got to be kidding me.
No, it's just much easier for the Democrats to sit and file their nails and say those awful Republicans. Look at those awful Republicans go. No, the Democrats haven't done anything. Now, what is the opposition to this super tax on the greedy rich? Well, the Republicans have argued for 20, 30, 40, 50 years that high taxes stifle economic growth. President Obama said 2 years ago, when he didn't do this 2 years ago, he said the wrong thing to do in a bad economy is to raise taxes. Now suddenly both sides are considering doing exactly that. You've got 3 different studies that have shown that if you raise these taxes, you are going to kill somewhere between 700,000 and 1.1 million jobs. We wonder why we're in this mess. But
maybe
all
more.
that notwithstanding, that has nothing to do with the issue. The issue has been, will continue to be spending. And that's what no one wants to talk about.
No, wait a second, Brent. Everybody wants to talk about it. I mean, everybody says we got to do something about spending in this country. Today, Treasury Secretary Geithner came out and said, you know, we're going to approach, the debt ceiling much more quickly than we had anticipated. So everybody, Republican and Democrat, and I was just saying to Sean, here's the president saying we've got to do something about spending. Simpson Bowles was asking for $2 billion or something in tax hikes. He's down now to, I think, 1.2, saying we got to do something in terms of limiting the rate of growth by chaining the CPI to entitlement spending.
But Juan, here's the problem with everything you just said. It's just lovely rhetoric. It doesn't mean a blasted thing. You've got revenues of $2.5 trillion entering the Treasury. Folks, understand the size of that. That's $2,500 billion. And we're being told we can't live off that. Right now we're spending $3.6 trillion. This is insanity. Someone has got to have the backbone to come up with specific cuts. Stop talking about how we need to cut.
Right,
come up with the cuts.
Stay right there.
The Republicans aren't much better than the Democrats.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that when we get back, but we are taking a sledgehammer and robbing our children blind and stealing from them. And the fact that very few people are talking about it is one of the reasons that I think we need people of principle in Washington. We'll come back. We have more with Juan and Brent right after the break. Also tonight, Michelle Malkin and Charles Krauthammer. Welcome back to Hannity. We continue with Juan Williams and Brent Bozell. All right, so Juan, let me see if I understand this position, your position well.
Okay.
So the Senate doesn't do their constitutional duty for 1,300 days. They don't pass a budget because they're too gutless to pass a budget. They don't want to put it on paper. The president the last week is playing golf 18 hours on the golf course, more than I've spent in a year. Okay. And he's now holding the line, if I have this straight here, for what amounts to 8.5 days of government spending. He's willing to raise everybody's taxes and hold the country hostage over the issue and the economy hostage because he so wants his rate increase for 8.5 days of spending? Tell me where the sense in that is.
I
don't see it.
I'll give you this. You're strong on principle, Sean. But Sean, let me tell you something. You are way out in line with the thinking of the American people. It's something like 60% now. I think it's in the mid 50% of Americans who approve of President Obama's handling of these budget negotiations. The president cut his vacation short.
Where's the criticism of the Senate?
How
they
much
don't
do
do
you
their
want
job
him to
for
do?
3 years.
I mean, and you talk about the Senate doing nothing.
Let me answer
the
this.
Senate has passed the bill that would give an extension of the Bush tax cuts to 98% of Americans, Sean. 98%. John Boehner, a guy I like very much, but John Boehner's ratings are now lower than Nancy Pelosi's. That's what the American people think about the way Republicans are behaving.
The Senate hasn't done their job in 1,300 days. And somehow, Brent Bozell, the blame is on the Republicans who did pass a bill. And President Obama, of course, the media in love with him, bows at his altar. There's been no criticism of him either.
Well, look, I disagree on 2 points. Number one, where the Senate is concerned, let's also keep in mind this. The Republicans in the House have passed hundreds of bills that have never seen the light of day because every single time Harry Reid refuses to bring them up for a vote in the Senate. So for this man to turn around and say that the Republicans are dilly-dallying when it's the Republicans who have been showing up for work in the House for 2 years and he's done nothing is abominable. Secondly, to the president, yes, he's playing this very well, Juan. He's politically, this is a masterpiece on his part, but it's also a complete obfuscation. I go back. It has nothing to do with the taxes you're talking about. It has everything to do with spending. And Juan Williams, right now on national television, you tell me what Barack Obama has stood up and said he will cut to balance his budget.
Well, I think he said that he would, in fact, chain our, rate of growth inflation in the country, the CPI, to many of his spending programs. He's talked about Medicare. In fact, Republicans have talked about eligibility age. We've talked in depth.
Juan, double talk. Give me
That's not double talk. If you limit the rate of growth, you will see that we will spend less money, Brent. That's what we want to do, right?
The quintessential Washington answer.
Oh,
it's the quintessential Washington answer. Now give me a specific. We've got $3.6 trillion in spending. That's $1.1 trillion above what we can afford.
Right.
What of the $1.1 trillion has the president recommended we stop spending money on?
Sean, what we're saying here is that what you don't do is take a hatchet. What you do is you slow the rate of growth of these programs, Brent. That's the way you do it. You don't want seniors thrown out. You don't want people who need education denied that education.
Zero cuts.
No, it's not a zero cut. And again, we're talking about even John Boehner saying yes in terms of age of eligibility to get into Medicare. That's a major step for our country in terms of reducing spending.
I'll give you. Republicans are playing the same game. I'm not saying Republicans are squeaky clean on this. I think some of them are guilty as well. But no one has got the guts to do what everyone campaigned on. Everyone campaigned on restoring fiscal sanity and blah, blah, blah. No one's got the guts to do it.
Let me add to Brent's point.
Okay.
Brent, Juan said something to me a moment ago that I want to address. Juan, you said maybe I'm out of touch.
Yeah.
Maybe I am, Juan, but to me, it's immoral what we're doing by stealing our children's money. And Juan, I don't think we're able to pay it back. And there's nobody in Washington in this whole debate, and Brent Bozell is right, there are some Republicans as well that are just willing to make any deal to make this go away.
Oh,
but to steal from our children this way and smash open their piggy banks, is a moral disgrace.
And it's not,
That's my opinion.
immoral to
So if I'm
crash
out of touch,
the
I'm out of
entire
touch.
economy. In other words, to say, oh yeah, Wall Street, go crazy, global economy collapse, and say, oh yeah, we
Well,
did
that's
it
gonna be
because we
Obama's
stood
choice.
on
There's a bill to
principle
pass.
and raised taxes
The
on
Republicans
everybody
passed the
because
bill,
we
Juan.
stood on principle. That doesn't help our children, Sean.
Juan, the Republicans passed a bill. The Bush tax cuts, which have been law for 11 years, can continue. That's up to the president and Harry Reid.
98% if they just say yes to what the president's offering. 98%. In fact, it's up to 99 if you go up to the 400,000.
Well, but the president made fun and mocked Speaker Boehner when he said, let's do it at $1 million. And the president said, you're just supporting those that make 900,000. The president...
Yeah, that's not negotiating,
we're back to talking
Sean.
about what doesn't matter. Juan, you're back to talking about what doesn't matter. It's not taxes, it's spending.
That's right.
And I know the comfort zone. The comfort zone of the left is to talk about the greedy rich who won't pay their fair share.
You guys have made your point.
To do with this.
I've had it hit into my head, but I wish you'd listen to the idea that compromise is not a bad word.
Okay, then fine. Let's all agree on tax cuts for 98%.
How about we compromise on spending?
No, well, then let's lower the rate of
Juan,
spending.
if we don't reduce... Juan, I have a plan. I like the Mac Penny plan. You cut 1 penny out of every dollar after you freeze spending for 6 years, and we'll balance the budget. Washington is incapable. It's a drug. It's crack cocaine. It's heroin, all wrapped up in one to them, and they refuse to do it because their power is predicated on it.